The Star Trek franchise is undoubtedly one of the most popular sci-fi series in the history of pop culture, and it has introduced us to the legendary Starship Enterprise. This starship was first introduced in 1966, and it has gone through many changes and upgrades as the Star Trek franchise branched out into animated series, feature films, and live action. Ranging from the pre-Federation Enterprises to the USS Enterprise and the NCC1701G Enterprise, this vessel has constantly evolved to keep up with the times, and it remains at the core of the Star Trek universe. Today, we will explore every single version of the Enterprise and tell you all about this signature spacecraft in the Star Trek universe. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What is the Enterprise, and how did it first originate? The Enterprise, or the USS Enterprise, was essentially a spacecraft in the Star Trek franchise, and it was initially introduced as the means by which Earth first attempted to explore a new star system. The Enterprise NX01 successfully became the first Earth-built ship to reach Warp 5, and it was commanded by Jonathan Archer. Archer led this ship and his team to form many allies with the Federation, and also interacted with the Klingons, Suliban, Xindi, and so on. These events took place in Star Trek Enterprise, and this spacecraft served as the main setting for many events that took place in that series. However, the Federation's USS Enterprise is the most widely known starship, and it also served as the main setting for the original Star Trek series in 1966, as well as the animated series that was released in 1973. We don't know much about the origins of this starship, but it seems to be based on an unused design created by artist Matt Jeffries. In the original series, the ship's appearance actually went through numerous changes across the show due to budget constraints. What are the various versions of the Enterprise? There are many versions of the Enterprise, ranging from the pre-Federation Enterprises to Enterprise J, USS Enterprises, and even the NCC1701 version. Let us have a look at all of these different versions and get into the details of each of their special functions. Pre-Federation Enterprises from Star Trek Enterprise. There have been very few mentions of any ships bearing the name Enterprise in the pre-Federation era of Star Trek. One such spaceship was the USS Enterprise XCV-330, which has been mentioned in an episode of Star Trek Enterprise. We can see a painting of the ship in this episode, and the XCV-330 appears to be a huge probe-like ship with a tubular body. This was one of the earliest designs of the Enterprise, and it does not even come close to being the best or strongest version of the ship. The XCV-330's design was quite outdated even by pre-Federation era standards, and not much has been mentioned about this ship in canon history. This ship was succeeded by the NX01, which became the first Enterprise ship to reach Warp 5. NCC1701J, Star Trek Enterprise. The NCC1701J was a 26th century Federation Universe-class ship that was under the command of the Starfleet in a distant future. This starship played an integral role in the Battle of Procyon 5, during which the Federation emerged victorious against the Sphere Builders and then sent them back to their base. When Jonathan Archer decided to go on a suicide mission in 2154 in order to get rid of a Xindi weapon, Daniels sent him to the future, where he ended up on board the NCC1701J. Daniels hoped that Jonathan would see his own importance in the future and realized that he needed to mend things with the Xindi. This ship appeared in an episode of Azadi Prime, and it was a gigantic vessel that even had the ability to travel through time. Fans did complain about the NCC1701J's design, and it appears to be one of the least popular versions of the Enterprise. The show's writers also revealed that they named the vessel J without much thought, and Matty Koto stated that one of the writers had just suggested going with J, and the others agreed to go along with it. USS Enterprise NCC1701, Star Trek, the original series through Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. The USS Enterprise NCC1701 was the main starship for a long period of time, and it has been the main setting for incidents that took place from Star Trek, the original series, through to Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. After the United Federation of Planets came into existence, the Enterprise NX01 was discarded because it didn't hold a candle to Vulcan's advanced technology. The Enterprise did not function for some time until the USS EnterpriseNCC1701 was launched in the year 2245. This version of the ship was manned by Captain Robert April and Christopher Pike until Captain Kirk finally took over this role around the year 2265. Captain Kirk went on a number of successful missions from 2265 to 2280, and this ship was the main setting for numerous legendary events during this time. This vessel also went through many upgrades and refits across its use, and it had a new interior around the time of the first Star Trek movie. This version of the Enterprise also had a huge saucer section, and it also had a secondary hull that was located below the saucer. This vessel was later manned by Spock and Willard Decker, but Captain Kirk once again took this responsibility during the events of Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. Unfortunately, this Enterprise had to be self-destructed during the movie, and Captain Kirk oversaw the process. USS EnterpriseNCC1701E, Star Trek First Contact, Star Trek Nemesis. After the NCC1701D Enterprise ship, Captain Jean-Luc Picard commissioned the NCC1701E ship that first appeared in Star Trek First Contact. During this story arc, the Enterprise E had traveled through time to locate and defeat the Borg. This ship had minimized its lower hull, and its nacelles were also aligned next to the saucer to give the Enterprise a narrow, sleek look. The Enterprise E had the look of a warship, and we are still unaware of what is in store for this starship in the future. In any case, this Enterprise underwent the biggest design change, and it resembled a long rod with an elongated, sharp appearance as compared to the usual grand appearance of the earlier versions. The Enterprise E was also the fastest as well as the strongest version of this starship. USS EnterpriseNCC1701D, Star Trek: The Next Generation. The USS EnterpriseNCC1701D was the 5th starship in the Enterprise series, and it was used as the Federation's flagship from the year 2363 to 2371. This ship was created at the Utopia Planitia fleet yards in the Sol system, and around 1,000 individuals contributed to its creation. The vessel was constructed under the watchful eye of Commander Quinteros, and Dr. Leah Brahms had also invented the ship's warp propulsion system design. This ship's design was even inspired by the USS Pegasus, and the Enterprise D was actually the first warship created in an alternate timeline. Captain Jean-Luc Picard commanded this ship, which was later destroyed at Viridian 3. After the destruction of this ship, it was converted into a museum, and it was later used again to tackle the Borg in 2401. Captain Picard's 8-year missions were carried out on this ship, which also suffered tremendous damage after facing the Borg threat. The ship's engines were decompressed, and it was once even hijacked in the year 2364. The Enterprise D was one of the first Starfleet ships to dock at Deep Space Nine, and it was also one of the very few Federation ships to use a cloaking device. Enterprise D was also the setting where Dr. Galen had finally discovered a message from a humanoid species in the Milky Way galaxy. This ship was also protected by a shield grid, and it also had a huge weaponry that consisted of many antimatter mines, torpedo launchers, and so on. USS EnterpriseNCC1701A, Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home through Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. The USS Enterprise NCC1701A played a huge role in the Star Trek movies, and it was a Constitution II class ship from the 23rd century. It was operated by Starfleet, and it was later decommissioned and replaced by the Enterprise B. This ship had a number of customized features, and it had several maritime relics ranging from a steering wheel to a sailing vessel. This sailing vessel had the ship's motto inscribed on it, and the ship's officers' mess also had a number of portraits of important historical figures. This ship was commissioned in 2286 at the San Francisco Fleet Yards, and it soon went on a shakedown cruise which did not go smoothly. The ship was then sent for repairs under the watchful eye of Captain Montgomery Scott, who realized that the ship's doors and transporters were malfunctioning and that some of the control interfaces also didn't work. After getting the ship up and running, the Enterprise A proved to be very useful in a number of Federation missions. This ship was eventually sold to the Defense Forces of Chal, where it was commanded by a retired James Kirk until its destruction. In fact, Captain Kirk was the only person to captain this ship for a period of 7 years. USS EnterpriseNCC1701B, Star Trek Generations. After Enterprise A was decommissioned, a new Enterprise model known as the NCC1701B was launched in Star Trek Generations in 2293. This ship was launched under the Excelsior class, and John Harriman took the responsibility of becoming Enterprise B's captain. This ship had a long service period of around 36 years, but has mostly appeared in non-canon story arcs. The Enterprise B had a flat saucer section, and the ship's neck was also removed in order to give it a sleek, streamlined appearance. This ship also had new impulse engines, and the caps of the nacelles were also renewed. When the ship was first launched, many honorary guests such as Captain Kirk, Montgomery Scott, and the decommissioned crew of the Enterprise A were invited for a tour, and they were all incredibly impressed by the ship. While Enterprise B's first mission was just for publicity purposes, it was a capable ship that was able to recognize distress calls from other Federation ships. Over a period of time, the Enterprise B was succeeded by the Enterprise C after serving from 2293 to 2344. USS EnterpriseNCC1701C, Star Trek, The Next Generation. While the USS EnterpriseNCC1701C only appeared in one episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation, it is one of the most important versions of the ship. This ship was an Ambassador-class vessel that differed a lot from the Enterprise B in terms of appearance. While the previous versions were elongated and streamlined, the Enterprise C had a long neck as well as a tubular secondary hulk that gave it a bulky look. This ship played a huge role in the Federation's plan to ally with the Klingons, and it was even destroyed in 2344 while defending the Klingon outpost Narendra 3 from being destroyed by the Romulans. During this time, Captain Rachel Garrett commanded the ship when it attended to the distress call at the Klingon outpost. This ship was a link between the events of the 23rd and 24th centuries, and it also showed the transition from Captain Kirk handling the ships to Captain Picard's takeover. The Enterprise C also had bright red and blue nacelles, which stood out among other versions of this ship. It also traveled through time through a rift and even created an alternate history where it encountered the Enterprise D. Eventually, Enterprise D's crew helped repair the Enterprise C, and they realized that this vessel needed to return to its own time. However, the Klingons destroyed both vessels in this alternate history before they could fix anything. NX01, Star Trek Enterprise. The NX01 was seen in Star Trek Enterprise, which was set around 100 years before Captain Kirk came around. This version of the Enterprise was quite refreshing, and it was designed after the Akira-class vessels seen in Star Trek First Contact. The NX01 was the first starship in the NX class, and it was launched in 2151 after the Broken Bow incident. The ship was actually launched 3 weeks before schedule because the United Earth needed a ship to send a Klingon named Clang back to Kronos. The Vulcan ambassador Soval was against this ship's launch because he believed they were not ready to venture into space just yet. The ship went ahead with its launch under the leadership of Captain Archer, but it was still not completely ready. The ship's spatial torpedoes were not calibrated at its launch, and it also still needed phase cannons. Over the course of its usage, the ship also suffered some damages, and it was then restricted to travel only over short distances for some period of time before resuming regular activity. The NX01 played a significant role in many important events, such as the Temporal Cold War, the destruction of colonies on Paragon II, the Xindi incident, and so on. It was also Earth's first contact with many otherworldly species, such as the Akali, Klingons, Orions, and so on. NCC1701F, Star Trek Picard. The NCC1701F was an Odyssey-class starship used by the Federation, and it was the 7th ship in the Enterprise series. This Enterprise appeared in Star Trek Picard and played a huge role in Commander Ro Laren's undercover research. In the year 2401, Admiral Elizabeth Shelby was the ship's captain during the events of Frontier Day. After leaving Sol Station, Shelby and her crew faced the Borg Collective, and this ship was soon decommissioned in 2402. The Picard logs state that this ship was launched in the year 2386, and it was under the command of several captains over the course of 15 years. The ship suffered some damage during the Monfet Gambit, and also during their attempt to rescue Raelian refugees, which is why it was decommissioned and replaced by Enterprise G so early. This ship had a unique design, and it also had a connecting boom between the saucer and star drive areas. NCC1701G, Star Trek Picard. After the decommissioning of Enterprise F, NCC1701G took its place in the third season of Star Trek Picard. This version of the Enterprise was quite reminiscent of older versions of the Starship, and it was a Constitution III class ship. This ship was sometimes even known as a Neo-Constitution and was quite well loved by fans. While the Enterprise G was not the most powerful version of this vessel, it could accomplish a lot of things, and it proved to be quite helpful. It was a mid-sized ship inspired by Constitution-class ships, and it was commanded by Captain 7 of 9 in 2402. This ship was actually launched in 2396, and it was under the command of Captain Liam Shaw. During this time, it was known as the USS Titan A, and it played a considerable role in countering the Changeling and Borg threats. After these events, the ship was renamed as the NCC1701G, or the Enterprise G, and it became the 8th starship to bear the name Enterprise. Conclusion. To sum it all up, the Enterprise is one of the greatest starships in all of science fiction, and it has contributed significantly to the charm of the Star Trek franchise. Ranging from the classic flagship to newer models, the Enterprise has always captured the audience's attention, and it's certainly a fascinating creation. That's it for this time, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.